if I can, oh, that looks like it works. We can just get started. So my name's Maddie. I am on the outreach team at World Relief, Western Washington. We are sharing on, let me share my screen, trauma-informed care and de-escalation strategies and responding to crises. So we, as World Relief, decided that this is a really good topic to kind of use our monthly Volunteer Connect to prepare any interested volunteers on how to de-escalate situations that you are put in with participants that may have complex traumas. So we're really excited that you guys are here. We can just get going. I want to give the credit where credit is due. A lot of this content was taken from one of our switchboard platforms, a video called A Trauma-Informed Approach to De-Escalation and Crisis Response. And so, yes, if you are interested in that content, you can reach out to me and I can send that your way. Just setting the scene a little bit for this training is I have a background as a certified Genesis counselor. That's just means that providing a biblical and neurochemical understanding of what causes self-destructive behaviors and planning for lasting change. And this came from my time as a caseworker at a women and children's emergency low barrier shelter. That means a shelter that minimizes entry requirements and obstacles for individuals. So people are able to receive shelter even if they are in active addiction or struggling with a mental health disorder or anything like that. So we saw a lot of different mental health crises and practiced de-escalation strategies with different people in active addiction and battling with mental health disorders like schizophrenia or suicidal depression. And so that is kind of where I'm coming to the table with this conversation. What are your guys' experience or exposure to trauma-informed care as the topic? Because I understand I do not have all the answers. We're not going to share all the answers here, so I would love to know where we're coming to the table with that information.
I can share. I am a licensed mental health counselor and mostly work with children and families. And then I felt like I wasn't able to share Jesus, and that was really important to whole healing for my clients. And so that's when we started to do foster care. And so like trauma lives in our home. So, and I still feel like one of my daughters who we adopted from foster care, still feel like, oh my gosh, every day I feel like I need tools. So I'm like, we had a hard day the other day. I was like, all right, this is my training for some good refreshers.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're here. You probably have a lot of, you definitely have a lot of experience and tips on what we're going to share. So I'm glad that you.
And I still feel like I know nothing. So, you know.
That's amazing. Anybody else want to share?
Well, I feel like Dulcie, that I could use all the tips and strategies daily, but I'm a social worker for the VA Medical Center. So I work with veterans, most from Vietnam era, World War II, Korea, and then our Iraqi freedom and those guys periodically. And so, and then I've kind of floated through, you know, the ER and our psychiatric emergency services a little bit. And so lots of trauma in different age groups and different experiences. And so, but again, I feel like I'm always looking for more support and strategies and reminders. So thank you.
Amazing. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Laura. Do you have anything to share, Kate, on that end?
Yeah, I'm probably the least experienced person here. Besides World Relief training, I did have a little bit of training when I was a student and teaching assistant at Oregon State University. And beside that, it's just my own personal experience that I went through suicidal thought myself and went through all the treatments and counseling and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all of our experiences and our trainings that we've been through, they're all really valuable to this conversation because trauma response and trauma-informed care is really delicate. And so I think there are definitely a lot of different insights that we can bring to the table when we're having this conversation. So I'm grateful that you guys are here to receive, as I'm also here to receive from you guys. So we can start with how to recognize a trauma response. So a skill to acquire in trauma-informed care is recognizing when a trauma response is happening. So this can really change the way that you respond in a de-escalating way when you know when it might be trauma that's kind of coming through in their response. So let's look at definitions. It's always great to start with definitions. So a working response, this isn't probably on every dictionary, but or a working definition is trauma is an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So one place I want to kind of sit in and dwell on is the circumstances that are experienced by an individual. This shows that trauma is experienced in an individual, and that means you might have 5 different people that have experienced similar traumas, but all of their responses can be wildly different just because they're bringing to the table all of what makes them in their trauma response. So as we kind of touched on just now, trauma lives in a lot of different forms, and one is in the body. So trauma shuts down parts of the brain that are responsible for planning and logical thinking, and it puts the body in high alert of danger. This is important to keep in mind when serving someone that's having a trauma response, because it helps you know, okay, maybe logic isn't the best way of responding to this situation right now. So an example could be if someone has a trauma with people in positions of power and they are unwilling to communicate boundaries with their boss, not casting judgment and not saying things like, well, why don't you just tell him your boundaries? Because logic in that moment might not be accessible or on your mind. So being aware of how it may be living in the body. We are programmed to identify threats that can be formed by many different factors. This is kind of what we touched on a little bit about how each person can respond differently because people are formed by their culture and they have their own personalities. And so some things that might be threats to you and I might not be a threat to others. And there's no real right way to respond to trauma or in trauma. A person can be activated or re-traumatized by events that may seem commonplace to others. Some of the different types of ways people can respond when they're having a trauma response. We have these familiar items, which are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which can look a lot of different ways when someone is responding in trauma or out of trauma. So fight can sometimes look reactive or demanding, defensive, angry, accusing, threatening, while flight, you may be withdrawn or more anxious or avoidant, leaving suddenly, isolating yourself because you're not feeling safe. Or maybe your response to trauma is to freeze, to disassociate with what's happening, to maybe feel a little helpless or unresponsive, maybe being panicked or indecisive. And then the last one is fawn. So that can look, this one's not talked about all the time, but this can look like people pleasing as a trauma response, or being codependent, not having boundaries, and or avoiding conflict, or being overly apologetic. So as you guys are looking at this list and how it can be enacted or experienced through a person, what might be some that surprised you of being like a trauma response, or some that like catch your eye?
I think definitely the people pleasing, the fawn aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. That also caught my eye of like, oh, I didn't really understand that that might be some way some people express or experience trauma or respond out of. Any other ones?
Yeah, I'm not used to the fawn one.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think sometimes when people are like people pleasy, or maybe they're not having boundaries with me and my space, and I kind of just think of it as like annoying, or um like maybe too attached, where having the humility to understand maybe that's the trauma response, that's good. One that kind of uh caught my eye is indecisiveness. I think I didn't really recognize that in some people might not have the ability to quickly make decisions when they're having a trauma response. I just thought that was a personality trait, and so I think that was one thing that surprised me. Um, so we've looked at the different trauma responses. This isn't all, the list is not limited to just this, but now we're going to talk about what escalation and de-escalation is. So escalation is when there is a distress to someone that becomes overwhelming. And again, there's difficulty in reasoning and making decisions and keeping calm. And this can include yelling and arguing and the inability to listen. So with any of this happening, you can have a flag up of, okay, this is getting a little bit escalated. This happens when your brain is wanting to protect itself. So it's a normal function, it's a normal response to things in which our body and our brain don't feel safe, is to escalate. But it's also a time when all of those other items kind of go offline of reasoning and keeping calm. And you kind of, what the term that they use is flipping your lid. There's not really much control after your lid is flipped, and there's not really much ability to request someone to flip their lid to get back into de-escalation. So then you have to know how to manage that. It's kind of like thinking of the base emotion when someone is escalating as fear rather than as anger or whatever their trauma response looks like. Where de-escalation is a communication style or a tone or speed of your voice or breathing, to use when different participants or clients are getting escalated and distressed or overwhelmed. It's where you help restore calmness and assist the clients or the participants in coping or listening to them or engaging with them. And then this de-escalation strategies, we do not typically request they be used when immediate safety concerns are present. Obviously, we don't want to escalate things more, but if you or the person that's being escalated is in an immediate safety concern, or they are an immediate safety concern, you want to respond to that emergency rather than responding in de-escalation, which is like calling 911 or getting a supervisor if you're not feeling safe or anything like that. So responses are just to restore calm and to contribute to, or not to contribute to the escalation in any way. And one part of de-escalation is kind of looking inward and kind of recognizing your own trauma responses to not contribute to escalation is really hard when our trauma responses are maybe triggered by someone's that we are talking to. So being prepared to know how to handle if you do get triggered in a moment with your trauma responses while talking to an individual. Working with people that have experienced trauma might match the trauma you have experienced or trigger a trauma within you. So being prepared and knowing how, if you're working with populations that are high stress or are more vulnerable and available to be exploited, being more ready to prepare to your own triggers in that way. Now let's talk about techniques to mitigate escalation. Where we will start is there's 4 core actions that you can go through when mitigating escalation. The first one is to prepare. If you do have the luxury to prepare for a hard conversation that you know of, or know that bad news was given and you're going to have to mitigate that potential escalation that will be present, planning and preparing for that is key. So knowing your triggers, that kind of goes into looking internally, knowing your triggers and how you control them in stressful situations is important in the preparation process. Reflect on how you are doing before stepping into a stressful conversation. Is now a good time? We kind of explain it as like every person has a bucket, and sometimes people's buckets are full, and when other people try to pour their bucket in because their bucket is full into an already full bucket, it just overflows. So is your bucket full before you step into those situations? May it not be a good time to have this conversation? And then you can notice signs in your body as well to see if you're ready. If you have like sweaty palms or your heart is beating fast or anything like that, those are signs that your body's in stress. So responding to those, giving them time to kind of calm and settle and center again is important. And let's say you're having a conversation where you know it's going to be more difficult because a resource isn't accessible to a certain participant or someone that's staying in your home, and if you can prepare for that conversation to gather reliable information that is true and not just based on like what you may know, because you don't want to offer up any solutions to anything that isn't actually going to help them. So gathering reliable and accessible information, if that means from a World Relief caseworker on where a certain case is at with something in terms of like housing or employment, or gathering reliable information about community if they're looking for community, or where can you point them to, and coming prepared with maybe different plans. Sometimes you don't have the luxury to prepare like this, but being attuned to these items might help you within a situation where it might be escalation might be possible and present. And then talk to someone before. Tell someone that you're having this conversation. Tell them what your hesitancies are, maybe get some support, maybe just some more visibility into what you're holding. The next one is engage. So this is when you're presently in the conversation and you're engaging with the participant or with the person. So in the meeting, evaluate for your safety concerns during your conversation. If you don't feel safe with a participant and they're getting escalated, maybe keep the door open or ask someone to sit with you in the conversation, making sure that you are safe in the conversation and have a way out if need be. Provide time and space in the conversation to come back to the center. You might be feeling triggered in the middle of the conversation, or they might be getting angry at you and you don't know how to hold that in the moment. You're welcome to ask for to take a break. You're welcome to say, okay, I feel like this is getting escalated. I really want to work through this with you. Can we maybe take 5 minutes to come back? And both of you working on getting centered again, or at most you working on how to collect your or respond to maybe internal triggers that may be happening. With that, don't rush the conversation. These conversations are really important to rebuilding and healing with people that have experienced trauma. And so don't rush it. If there is items that feel urgent, you can respond to the urgency, but within the conversation, it can be slow and taken good care of. Remain calm and rooted. One tip that people have mentioned is you can put your feet fully on the ground or have the conversation maybe standing up so that you can feel the centeredness in your body. Avoid arguments and power struggles in the conversation. Be aware of maybe a power dynamic that can be present if you have resources that a participant doesn't have. That's a power dynamic and can hurt and trigger someone's escalation. So be aware of that and avoid arguments. And then minimize any new information. So if you have a new addition to an issue that pertains to why this person may be escalated, withhold that information. And it kind of just makes the situation worse when it's like, here's new information that you weren't prepared to hold as you're presently getting escalated. Then we have listen. So provide your undivided attention. And then again, pay attention to your own safety in that as well. Try to listen for mental health emergencies, child safety issues, or family violence that may be happening, because those are things that emergencies that we need to respond to, and that need to be reported to a caseworker or anything like that. So pay attention and listen to those. Do not interrupt when someone is kind of getting out all of what they need to get out, and as you're listening, being an active listener. Delay problem solving. So you may have a solution, but you don't want to just say, here's the solution, you shouldn't be escalated right now. Delay that. If there is a solution, make sure you're prioritizing listening to the participant before offering a solution. You can paraphrase saying, am I understanding this correctly? That's just an item of active listening, of making sure that you're getting all the information that they're telling you correctly and there's no assumptions being made, and giving them the opportunity to make sure that you're actively listening, validating the things that they're saying. Oh, that sounds really hard. Tell me a little bit more about that. How did that make you feel? And then reserving judgment. This is really hard, especially when someone is in an escalated state and they may be saying things that they don't really mean, or they are passing judgments on you that are hurting you in the meantime. It could be like, Americans don't care about anyone but themselves, or something along the lines of kind of crossing a line to respond out of that trauma. Reserve your judgment. Maybe participants may have worked with corrupt people in the past and that trust has been broken, and they're experiencing that trauma actively in their in their escalation with you, or my caseworker is not doing anything. We don't want to affirm a belief or invalidate something that they're saying. We just want to listen to them. Tell me more about that. That sounds really good. And then lastly, we have links. So if something was crossed in the middle of the conversation, gently but firmly re-establishing boundaries. This allows you to not open yourself up to being a punching bag for someone. They know that they can come to you to just relay all of their things on you, or saying something, approaching it as on like a human basis. So saying something along the lines of, I'm on your team and I want to support you. I do need some space to get back to you with your request after I think it through, or something along those lines. Focus on what you can do rather than what you cannot do, and don't make any promises. We don't want to re-traumatize someone if anything were to happen where that promise cannot be kept. Offer to bring a world relief staff involved in helping with a situation, or scheduling a time to touch base again on that certain topic. Let's say there is something that's really making them mad about or sad, or any way their response is happening with their trauma, and more information is needed for that to be resolved. You can say something along the lines of like, you should reach out to your caseworker about this. I'll also touch base maybe with the caseworker on what is needed and next steps. Let's touch base again next week and see how it's going, or make sure you're coming to me again and talking to me about just being open. We don't want you to have the power dynamic as well of like feeling like you're the caseworker rather than the caseworker it's themselves, but just being open and available in a human way, rather than I'm here to answer all of your questions, but I'm here to support you as a friend. And then exploring coping strategies, if you know of any, exploring those with the participant of like, I notice you seem really angry about that. Maybe this has helped me when I get angry, or something along those lines, exploring coping strategies. And then we advise individuals to leave with at least one concrete next step, so people don't feel like those situations were meaningless or only harmful, but leaving with at least one concrete next step. And that can look really small, of like, I'm going to talk to this person, or you should go connect with this person, or something along those lines. All right, we're wrapping up here, but I do have a practice scenario that I would love your guys' input on, how to respond in this situation. I don't think there's a specific right way to do it, but I would love to know how you guys would do it if you were in this situation. So it is a Saturday night. You are hosting a family in your home, and they are feeling anxious about getting permanent housing and keep asking you about helping them find an apartment. The father has been trying to call their caseworker at World Relief for an hour and has not been given a response. He is urging you to be the co-signer on his lease to ensure that he can live close to his family in the area. You have heard from World Relief that they have applied for an apartment but are waiting for their application to be approved. What do you do?
My first thought is listen and like, be present and like validate feelings. Like, this is hard. It's so hard to wait. That must feel really challenging or, anxiety provoking. And another thing I feel like we always try to keep in kind of like the forefront when we're working with different people who are in crisis is your crisis is not my crisis. Like, because you're feeling escalated and you're feeling in crisis doesn't mean that I need to take that on and that I need to be in crisis with you, or that I need to feel crisisy myself. So like being that calm person that is not escalated, so that if they're ready to regulate or calm down about it, then they can like try to match your peace and your demeanor.
That's good. Like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And I would say, like, as the next step, offering support about things that you can do, things that you're unable to do, like you are unable to be a co-signer, on the apartment, but we are able to also try to get a kids work over do other things that could be helpful. But maintaining your own boundary around the request.
Yeah, oh, that's good. Yeah, being able to kind of set the expectation of that's not my place, but this is what offering a different next step and what they're asking rather than just saying, can't do that, sorry. I love that. That's really good. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think listening, like Darcy said, is the main key, and trying to understand more, because like the part that's saying, like, I have heard from Lily that they have applied, maybe hearing from themselves to know that if that is actually has been done, so you don't assume that. So gather that information from them, and if they're able to say that themselves, then that will help them actually kind of realize that that is a good progress that they had already been done, and we can repeat that back to them when they said, like, yeah, I have submit that. And then, like, oh, that's great, encourage them that they have done something. And like calling really for an hour and no one responds, you can check if there's like office hour, or maybe we can try again tomorrow, kind of like um helping them as much as you can. But if you are unsure, like, I'm not sure, like, if it's my case, I don't know if I can be co-signer. I might have to wait and ask Lily first if that's appropriate to do. But so I wouldn't confirm or promise anything yet. I'm gonna be like, oh, this is where I'm at. This is like where you are, and what we can do further. What would be our next step? Help them develop those kind of strategy and plan.
Yeah, that's so good. About like after the hearing out all of what people are feeling, to we've had this happen before where someone is asked to be a co-signer, one of our volunteers, but they didn't know what they could and couldn't do, which totally makes sense. Some things are we have a lot of amazing volunteers that have really, really good hearts, and they're like, I won't take that off the table. I didn't know that's what I was going to be asked to do, but I wouldn't take it off the table. And although we don't want any of our volunteers to do any of that, to explain to the participant, I don't really know what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do, but let me talk with the person at World Youth that I know on this day, and I'll get back to you with what they say or something like that, so they can prepare for. They know that something is happening in terms of next steps with their issue. So I really, really like that. It's good.
I was thinking of what you were saying, Kate, that kind of being able to like almost shift the blame, like, and say like, oh, well, I'm not allowed to do it, but that's the rule, like blame it on the rule kind of thing. And like kind of on something like higher than yourself. I mean, you don't want to throw world relief under the bus, but like that's a rule, like the organization has a
Yeah.
rule. And you could even say it's to protect you, right? It's to protect you so that, when you move into your housing or whatever. And then I also think another piece that can be helpful is like slowing it down, even though obviously like they're trying to rush things. Just like helping them like figure out what to do in the waiting and like how to be productive, because they're just so desperately looking for housing for their family, right? And so to what can they do to keep their mind, their body, and their heart busy in the waiting.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I think being aware or not being aware, but being curious of what internally curious. You don't want to ask questions of like what's actually going on or something like that. But being internally curious on the front end of why housing is such a stress. And knowing like these people come from a background of being displaced from their home, and that is the trauma that's being present in their body. So even maybe the world relief caseworker has explained this multiple times, but the stress of that, of maybe losing their home again or being displaced is hard to hold for them in that moment, especially when they're not able to get a hold of someone that would know the answers in that moment. So yeah, I think all of you guys have amazing insight on this. And I've received all that you've said and will go on really grateful. So that is ultimately all I had for, it was short but sweet. And definitely this is a really complex topic. And so doing it well it will change as situations come up. And what we really encourage our volunteers to do is debrief, 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 debrief. If you are in a situation that you had to practice trauma-informed care, or you don't know if you did it well enough or not, well enough, quote unquote, I don't know how that's done, but or you just want some extra support, if we would love for you to reach out to someone, your World Relief staff member that you're in contact with, about just debriefing your experience in that situation, so that next time you can feel more prepared, and we can just build on that. But thank you guys for being here. Is there any questions before we head out?
Thanks so much.
Of course. I appreciate you being here.
It was a really good refresher. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course, of course. Well, blessings on your guys' week. Thank you guys so much for being here. And if you need the content, just email me. I will put my email. Sure. I'll put my email, or you can email whoever you're in contact with in your on our staff. But here is my World Relief email if you guys want that content. So thank you guys so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you so much. I have one thing I
Yeah,
would like
yeah.
to ask. I
Yes.
really appreciate